Welcome to Properly Freelance. It's Jenny Elborn here, and I'm joined today by Wayne James. We are sitting here with our beer and our Guinness. It's Friday
Friday
afternoon,
afternoon,
nearly
that is.
Friday evening. So it's really nice to be just sitting down for a nice chat at the end of the working week. Although I gather it's not quite the end of your week, Wayne.
No, not
Not
quite the end of
quite.
your week, but we're very close, and
Very,
this is
very
it. Yeah.
close. Hopefully, this will set you up well for a productive evening of whatever you have to do tonight. So, would you mind starting off by just telling me about yourself? Because we have chatted a little bit before at the Impact Hub, and I know you do something around education, and I know you're very cool, but I can't remember all the details.
Right,
So,
right.
fill me in.
Yeah, so I suppose today I teach a series of courses around London, a lot to do with employability skills. Um, so everything from customer service and retail, lots of youth work and helping young people get their heads wrapped around careers and how to develop necessary skills for careers. I teach an ICT course to primarily middle-aged to older people within Lambeth, help them become comfortable with technology and perceive new career opportunities or work opportunities to do that.
Is that, and what's your background before that? Do you have a background in IT?
Yeah, that's kind of how it started. I just finished, and the other thing I teach is I teach entrepreneurial courses
Right, okay.
as well. So I teach a series of courses
Yeah, yeah. Because
around
I
the
always
city.
wonder this about people who are in education, because that's a sort of vocation in itself. But actually, you've also got to have loads of expertise in the things
Yeah,
that you are
yeah.
teaching to a degree, depending on what level you're teaching them
Well,
at.
it's actually quite important
Yeah,
to have some
to know
background.
what you're
Yeah, to
teaching.
know what you're teaching. Yeah. So I spent most of my life, 20 plus years, in the software industry
Mhm.
in Canada and the U.S. And when I was young, I that started as a technical guy. So I assembled computers back when
Mm.
hard drives were massive sizes, and you got 10 megs for something that was the size of a big encyclopedia.
Mhm.
I started setting up and installing, and then installing networks and doing a bunch of technical stuff. And then my career evolved into more business development and product management type things. And so through that, I gained a lot of experience in technology.
Mm.
A lot of it kind of the business of technology and the logistics of it, but I
Mhm.
still had a background technically enough that I could say I understood IT. And um, and that's what I did for 20 plus years. And I guess like a lot of people who wind up going freelance, I kind of grew tired of the kind of pattern which is common in corporate settings. The higher up you go in corporate organizations, the less it's about helping customers and solving customer problems, and the more it's about meeting quarterly numbers and bringing revenue.
Mhm. And
And
managing people maybe rather than
yes, and
delivering
managing
the thing
people, and
itself.
yeah, and I got involved as a young person in technology because I loved solving problems and I loved learning about technology. So that was always the focus for me, and I started to get paid really well because my passion for solving problems, combined with an ability to explain things well to people, could generate revenue for clients because I could solve problems
Mm.
and billable and make them buy products and things of that sort. So it worked really well.
Yeah.
I was doing something I liked, and businesses could use that to generate revenue.
Mm.
Or as that starts to, the balance of that starts to lean more to generating revenue and not helping clients as much, I start to get bored and it comes to become quite monotonous. So somewhere around 2004 or five, I think, I just kind of got fed up. I started playing music as a hobby on the side,
Mm.
and I decided to make this absolute jump out of the corporate world and just do something that was going to be fun and meaningful to me. Um, and it was, I guess, for a lot of people at the time, they were really big risk to take to go from high paying
So
tech.
did you quit your job and become a musician?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
wow.
I had about two
Okay.
years of savings.
That's a big jump, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a big
If
jump.
you were kind of the musician that we all have in our head, when we think about what that means to be a musician trying to make it.
Yeah, and well, worse for me is I never played music. I had just started to
Oh, yeah, I
learn
see.
music, so it
So
was
you were
just
a
like
really fledgling
yeah,
musician
yeah.
then.
I was, but I ended up luckily meeting. I met two guys who were exceptional musicians and artists, and I
Mm,
played bass. I still play bass, and so all I had to do was be able to hold the groove. I didn't have to be a great bass player. If I could just
mm,
hold the groove, they did all the fancy singing and all the stuff
wow.
that people really liked. And so because of that, we became quite popular very quickly. And so I could see we could earn a little bit of money. I wasn't earning anywhere near that what I used to earn, but
Yeah,
could earn a little bit of money. And I wanted to pursue that because it was pulling something out of me that I had never
yeah,
challenged myself with.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I jumped. I didn't think it was as much as a risk as everyone else thought because I was quite good in my job, and I thought, well, worst comes to worst, I'll go
You can go
back.
back.
I'll go
Yeah, I
back.
think that's a really important lesson, actually, isn't it? A thing
Yeah,
to remember is that whatever you make these huge, great decisions and it feels very risky, but it doesn't have to be forever. I mean,
right.
obviously, in this economic climate, sometimes it feels like, well, it might not be forever out of choice, but what if I try to go back and I can't get a
Well,
job?
yeah,
But
yeah,
maybe 2004 to 5, it wasn't quite so bad. Do
yeah.
you think you would do it now if you were in that situation now in this climate?
I would I would probably do it now only because the place I was in was a quite secure. I'd done some pretty cool stuff in the software world
Mm,
that I had a pretty good reputation and
yeah,
contacts with large clients, and that's usually in the business world. If you've got contacts with people who spend, they don't care and they'll take you whenever.
yeah.
Yeah, as
So
long
it's
as you.
kind of about knowing your skills and your place on the
Yeah,
market and
yeah,
getting there.
exactly,
So one of
exactly.
the things we're going to talk about, kind of as our main topic today, is going to involve sort of discussing that idea of risk and what kind of people are in a position to do this and take that kind of risk.
Right,
But
right.
just before we get onto that, do you want to just talk about the bit between? So you've got as far as you're a newly freelance musician,
Right.
still in Canada, the
In
US,
Atlanta at
in
this time, I'm in
Atlanta.
Atlanta. Yeah, yeah.
How do you get from there to being a education professional in London?
So yeah, it's an interesting story. So I get involved in this music thing. It's really exciting, and then 4 years go by, and the band is growing and becoming more popular, but I'm not improving as a musician as quickly as I thought.
Oh,
And so I kind
are
of
you
give.
still just playing like three chords and trying to get
Well,
by?
I'm
And
learning songs. So we play a lot of covers, and I had some originals in there. But basically, I would go and learn a song, and I could play that song, but I couldn't do much outside of that. Like you'd
right,
have to give me something to go and practice, and then I come.
okay,
But I couldn't just stand up and make something
you
up.
couldn't jam.
Yeah, yeah. I could sort of fumble my way through jamming, but I didn't have anywhere near the theory or the
Mm.
understanding to do much more than that. I
Oh.
couldn't sing, and the band really wanted me to sort of grow in the band, and I didn't know how to
This
do it.
is really how I feel about my own ukulele skills. Actually, it's quite interesting. Yeah. Oh wow.
So I didn't know how to do it. So I give myself this deadline because I was originally in the U.S. on a work visa from Canada,
Okay.
and that visa had expired. It allowed me to work in the software industry specifically, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to give myself a deadline. Usually, when things are meant for me, they work out. So 4 years. If by this date, and that date was 2011, I
Mm.
haven't secured my stay in the U.S., I'm going to use the opportunity to come and see my family
Yeah.
here in London, where I was born,
Right.
kind of do the
Okay.
full circle thing.
Mm.
And I have my son lives here, and so there's an opportunity to come and do that. That was quite important.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I'm going to let the universe decide. If that hasn't happened, then I'm going to take that sign. And if I haven't found myself in a different place as an artist, then I'm going to take that sign. And so when the time came around, I really felt like a part of the problem with my development was that I was in well above my ability because of these other musicians,
Yeah.
and that I was never going to be to take the risks I needed to take in that setting.
Hmm.
We played at the Apollo, and we did events for Usher's birthday and his son. So we're playing all these high profile things,
Wow.
and so I wouldn't allow. It was so high stake that I just had to stay and do what I knew how to do, and
Right.
if you want to grow, you actually have to take some risk
You don't want to make a fool of
and not
yourself
be
in front of
good.
Usher's son. That's like
Exactly.
one of my worst nightmares.
Yeah,
What if I made a
exactly.
fool of
Yeah,
myself in front
exactly.
of Usher's son?
Exactly.
I guess,
Like
yeah, maybe if it
everyone
had
has that.
been,
Yeah.
if the whole band had been less successful, you may have been different for
I would
you.
have been
But
okay not being, so I
interesting.
realized that I need to kind of step away and go down the journey that everyone else had already been down,
Mm.
and kind of start from scratch, because I kind of jumped in at a really high level and not really walked the walk that an artist needs to walk. So
Yeah.
coming back to London was me walking my own walk
So you
musically.
were still sort of primarily a musician at that stage in terms
Yes,
of what you wanted to do with your
yes,
profession.
I wanted to pursue music, and I thought I was going to come over here, create magic as I usually do, and then find a way to bring my band over, and that was going to be that, and it was going to happen in 2 years, and
Yeah.
that was going to be that.
Yeah.
Well,
And
it didn't happen in 2 years at all. But what was interesting is I thought, well, I'm going to have to eat while I do this, and on my own as a musician, I'm not good enough to earn money full time like I was with the unit. So I have to have another way to earn money. I thought, well, why don't I? Teaching has always been something I've liked doing and thought was in my future. So why don't I, try and do some freelance teaching? So I showed up here in 2011, spent a couple months with my sister, and then I got a job managing uh, an apprenticeship type program up in Camden, which was amazing and terrible. But at the same time, it was amazing because it taught me the basics of education in the UK.
yeah.
I learned about qualifications and apprenticeships, and made some good contacts, and
Yeah.
sort of got right in. It was terrible because the organization, despite having some really good people, really had some strange motivations, and
You can learn a lot from a difficult job though,
yes,
or a kind of
you can
organisation
learn.
that's slightly on its knees. You can
Yeah, I mean,
learn
they
a
were
lot.
super aggressive, but the owner had his plan was to get it to a place where he could sell it and make a lot of money off of it.
Right.
And so there were some questionable practices as relates to how we leveraged the young people we were working with
Oh
that
wow.
didn't sit well. But I did learn a lot,
Yeah.
including the fact that I didn't think I wanted to work for another company. If working for corporate
So that was a
was tough,
payroll
yeah,
job,
that was
was
a
it?
payroll job.
Ah,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
So working for corporate was difficult. Working for a small business was just
Even
not.
harder.
I was not going to be able to do that.
Yeah. So it tipped you over the edge into freelancing.
Yes, it did.
Fantastic.
It did. That combined, I had a really uh, unfortunate. My mother passed. She got really sick just at the time when this company got sold. I went home to Canada to look after her in the hospital. She passed, and we had to bury her. And then I came back, and the company had been sold to someone else
Wow.
who was a liquidator, and they weren't paying us for the last, I don't know, I think it was a month or something. And they just said, we're shutting down.
You may as well be a freelancer if that's
Right,
going to
right.
happen
It's
to you,
just like,
might you?
wow. So I was actually in deep trouble. I had given my notice on my flat because I was moving before I left. Came back, had no paycheck for the last month, so no money to move anywhere, and I just lost my mom, so no job, no place to live, and was in a pretty strange and sort of dark place. So I spent 2 weeks. The brother of the guy who owned the company was a cool cat, and I went and stayed with him up in Green Lanes for 2 weeks and just
Yeah.
kind of got my head together.
Oh, Green Lanes.
Yeah,
Everyone's lived in Green Lanes.
I
I was
was.
there for a few years.
Were you?
Yeah, first moved to London. Green
Yeah.
Lanes. I know a lot of people pass through the Haringey ladder.
I went up there for two, and it was sort of an interesting time because he was a kind of a younger guy, and we played video games, and we played video games and did other silly young people things just to clear my head.
Yeah.
And then a week later, I just kind of got up and I thought, well, I'm going to start applying for roles. And I looked in the paper, and there was an ad for a tutor for. It was teaching people who were from the job center, customer service, retail, and team leadership type stuff. So I went and had an interview, and that really went well. And I walked from the interview, and I'd seen an ad for a flat in Stoke Newington where I was interested. And there was a Canadian lady, or a lady who had taken in Canadians before. And so we got to chatting, and I told her my situation, and she basically said, go get your stuff and drop it off here, and we'll figure out the details later. I think I didn't have to. I paid her rent maybe 2 months later.
I said you were cool, didn't I? I think it really pays to be I mean, you're personable, you're, friendly, approachable person, and I think that pays off sometimes because, like, you wouldn't be able to get through these kinds of situations that you find yourself in with if with all the red tape and kind of having to provide paperwork and all that, like you say, if you literally don't have a deposit to pay. But I think a little bit of charm goes a long way sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, in fact, as a freelancer, it becomes even more important. Like you've got to be good at building relationships and building to connect with people because you don't get anywhere in life, and everyone will tell you if you can't work with people. People help you get where you need to get to. And in our business as freelancers, it's all about your network and your contacts and getting work from people that you've done good work for or who know you and things of that sort.
Yeah.
So it becomes really important. Yeah.
So where you're at now is that you're teaching these various courses. Is it all freelance work that you're doing, or do you have some payroll work as well?
It's all freelance.
Okay.
I think I've had, my first two roles were freelance, but they were 3 to 5 days a week with the same company. So it was almost like being payroll.
I feel like we need a name for these jobs because a lot of us have been in them, and I've been in those jobs, and quite a few people I've spoken to have been in those jobs. I don't know what they should be called, but there's something. So the reason this podcast is called Properly Freelance is because I always had a job like that up until the end of last year.
Right.
So I was self-employed, but I had very secure money coming in from a client that was paying me for a few days a week.
Yeah.
And it's only kind of the last roughly 12 months that I've been properly freelance in my own eyes, which is much more about having to go and seek out your work yourself. Doesn't mean it can't be kind of regular and ongoing, but really being in charge of what I commit to on a fairly much week to week basis, which kind of makes me feel like I've entered a new territory, not necessarily better or worse. And I'm actually quite glad that I had those kinds of jobs in my past because that allowed me to get over some of the anxiety, I guess, that I had about being self-employed before actually having to worry about the whole aspect of finding my own work, which I wasn't having to do originally. So yeah, those kinds of jobs are pretty handy. I think when you can get them.
And I'd almost say a necessary sort of or really helpful step because while you're doing those things, not only do you have steady income coming in, but you're learning skills that you need for the job. I learned how to teach in those first couple of jobs.
Or even a part-time payroll. Somebody I know asked me this week, someone who is a full-time payroll job, said to me, what would you do? How would you advise going about it if you wanted to go from full-time to freelance? And actually I said, go part-time first because you're not taking such a big risk in terms of then having to build up your work. And I know that for me, the way that I got into freelancing was because the work available to me was part-time. So then I had this extra time to fill, and a lot of people that I've spoken to have been kind of come through a similar route. And it just gives you, however many days a week you got spare, you can use that to try out freelancing.
Yeah.
Without like quite so much risk.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that step is really important to have something you can rely on, and then you kind of wade slowly out into the freelance world until
you're up to your neck in freelance. Very nice.
Yeah. So then 2 years semi-freelance. The courses I was teaching were 3-week stints, 5 days a week, 9 to 5. I had a class for 3 weeks, which was amazing because it was full bore.
It was what? Sorry.
Oh, full bore, or
what does that mean?
Full on with 20.
Full bore.
Yes, I don't know where.
Is that American?
Yeah, that's some kind of. I don't even know what it means actually, but it's just you're full on essentially.
Hopefully, that will be helping us connect with many international listeners.
Yes.
Although alienating.
Maybe one of them can tell me what it means actually.
Full bore.
But
anyway.
Yeah, I was full on with 20 to 30, sometimes 40 people for 3 weeks, and when you have people every day who kind of have to be there for that amount of time, you really learn a lot about working with people and how to sort of manage yourself in the classroom. And then I could take breaks. I could take courses off and not teach. So I did that for a couple of years. I then took a full-time paid job because I thought I've done this kind of at the small provider level. I want to know how the big guys do it. And I saw a temporary 10-month role for maternity leave or something advertised by one of the large organizations in the teaching sector. So I thought, let me get in to see how they do this, just so I can get some best practice ideas. Did that for 10 months, 11 months, and learned a lot. And then I guess in that process, that brought me to Brixton from North London or East London. And in that process, I met a woman here who ran a community center that taught apprenticeships. And we had a quick conversation. We really connected very quickly, and she had me delivering her boot camp, 2-week boot camp apprenticeship for young people. Maybe 2 weeks later, we were delivering that.
Wow.
And that was
it's all
awesome.
about people, like you say.
All about
it's all about
people.
who you meet. Yeah. Which rooms you walk into.
So really, if we have time, a really bizarre story as to how that I even met her. So the company I was doing these 3-week courses for had me out flyering for an event. So I was riding my motorcycle at the time, and I would just drop off these flyers, and I just like, the worst thing I really didn't want to do, but I said I'd help out, so let me do it. So I come to Brixton, and I'm drop off some flyers at one location, then I cross the street, and there's a job center, Brixton Job Center, that I'm going to drop some flyers off. And I go in, and the lady says, "Oh, you can't come into this event. There's a show going on, a jobs fair, but if you give me the flyers, I'll take them in." And I, in my head, I knew that I should talk my way in, but I just kind of took the easy route and went, "Okay, fine, let me leave." I go outside, and a guy walks up to me and says, "Are these yours?" And he hands me my driver's license, my passport, and one of the documents that was in a bag that I was carrying on my motorcycle and had fallen out when I had crossed the street.
Wow.
And he picked it up and handed it to me. And I was just looked at him, and I was just like, Jesus. I totally forgot I had it in my bag. I would never have been able to find it. And he just happened to find me coming out. And when he handed it to me, right off the bat, I knew, Wayne, you need to turn around and go and do this job properly. So I went back in.
Because that was the reason that you'd come back out, was to get your stuff
back.
Yeah. It wasn't actually because you weren't meant to go in.
Right.
Oh, that's
So I turned around and I went back into the Brixton Job Center. And the lady who said I couldn't come in happened to be away. Someone else was there. I had gotten the name from the lady before, and before I knew it, I was inside walking around talking to vendors. And one of the vendors was this company I was going to start to work with 3 weeks later. And the lady was at the booth.
And that was the first time you met them?
Yeah, and we spoke, and she thought we had a great connection, and I was in the office interviewing the week after, and that's kind of how work shows up.
Yeah.
When you're out in the world
really
engaging with people.
I mean, I think it applies to a lot of things, whether you're a freelancer or not, but obviously when you're trying to find your own work, it's more relevant, but it's so true. Like, so many of the things that I'm trying to do or the work that I'm hoping to get is hugely dependent on one individual who's enthusiastic for it and who's in the right place at the right time. And I guess it works two ways. On the one hand, it's like you need to go in and meet people and not give up because you may just have not found the right person.
Right.
On the other hand, if the right person isn't there and maybe there's an organisation you want to link with but they just don't have the right person, don't beat yourself up.
Yeah.
Because I've been in that situation as well where you're just like banging your head on a brick wall because the right person's not there. But also, the right person has a bad day sometimes. And, you could have met her the day before, the day after, completely different.
Exactly. We just never know. And so it's really just about being out there and being open-minded and optimistic about every circumstance, no matter how it looks.
Yeah. Amazing. And you hadn't lost anything off your motorbike either?
No. And that whole thing, just like, wow, if I'd have lost my passport and my license and my birth certificate, which I think I'd been carrying around.
How would you ever have got a DBS check?
Yeah, how would I have done anything? That would have been just disastrous.
So that was like a awful day potentially awful day that turned into a fantastic day.
Yeah, and I just agreed because I was freelancing and I taught for these people, so flyering was nowhere near in my what I did.
Yeah.
But I was just doing them a favor because
someone's got to do it, haven't they?
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to do it.
Right. the program I ended up delivering was just one of the most unbelievable programs. I just loved it. It was called Reboot Camp, and we'd have 40 young people come in, and they wanted to get apprenticeships, but before they could go to the apprenticeships, they'd have to spend 2 weeks with me, and I would twist them and bend them
Yeah.
and excite them and get them ready to actually be in the working world. It was a really phenomenal program, and through that program, I met all my clients that I teach for now.
Yeah.
I met the Spiral team that I teach for now
Yeah.
in that building. I met the place I teach ICT at. I met the woman who owns that organization, who's the managing director through that organization, and all the work sort of came from there.
There's something to be said for just being in a room, isn't there? And not sitting as I kind of have this thought in my head that, you know, there might be people who might listen to this who are thinking about, you know, how do I find my work? How do I go about being a freelancer or whatever? It's so easy to just sit and stare at a computer screen. And I've done that. I've had days where I've kind of put the time aside to find work, and all I've done is sat and stared at my computer.
Right.
And actually, yeah, I might be able to send 50 emails, but that's way less effective than just being in a room somewhere. And you don't know what the chances are that you're going to meet the right person. But I mean, yesterday I went to visit a community centre where I'm looking to do a show, because I'm trying to work with one of my theatre groups that I run, and we wanted to take our work out to a wider audience. So we're looking for places where, you know, we don't have to do the legwork of finding our audience.
Right.
So I went to visit this community centre, and it was pretty positive, and I think it will probably work out for us to do a show there. But it just so happened that while I was there, this other woman was also there for a meeting with them, and she runs a festival locally to the centre, and they're looking for groups exactly like ours to put on work. And you know, I just never would have known about that if I hadn't just walked into that space. And it was an effort to get there. I had to get a taxi both ways and this, that, and the other. But I think that was probably as valuable a way for me to spend 3 hours than if I'd have spent 3 days looking at a computer. And it was way more enjoyable as well.
Yeah. So that would serve us as my sort of rule number one, let's call it, in getting business.
Top tip. Yeah.
You definitely need to spend some time in front of the computer, sending out and CVs and all the rest of that. But then you need to stop and go out into the real world, especially if it's just one of the responses that you've got or an opportunity to meet, and go out and engage, because that's when the magic can happen, because you're out there and you're available for the universe to reward you.
Yeah, and I think it's probably quite good for your mental health as well.
Yeah.
Spend less time looking at your computer.
Yeah, exactly.
Really good. The topic that we were going to talk about today was about privilege, actually. So I started doing the podcast kind of thinking that it might be interesting for people who are already freelancers or people who are thinking of becoming freelancers to listen to and kind of get some ideas, advice, etc. But one of the things that troubles me a little bit about it is that I recognise myself as coming from a relatively privileged background. I would say that I have always paid my own way as a freelancer, and you know, I've reached a point with it where I am not and have never been dependent on somebody else, but I have this awareness that there's maybe a bit of a security blanket there, that I am able to take risks because I know that, you know, I have a sort of family network around me which has enough financial security that there's absolutely no way I'm gonna, you know, end up without a roof over my head or food to eat or whatever. And so one of the topics I was really keen to cover on the podcast was, is freelancing basically the domain of privileged and elite people, or is it something which actually can be turned to the advantage of people who are less privileged? So I'm really glad that Wayne has suggested that we might talk about this together. And I'd love to get your thoughts on it, really, Wayne. Why you think that's something that you could talk about, and whether you think that it does fall down one side or the other, whether things are changing.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really important conversation for us to have, especially in this era and this age, where employment is changing from the old days when you got a job for 20 years and to today when jobs last, you know, a good long job is 1-2 years.
I'm pretty bored after 20 minutes, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, impatience is one of my reasons for freelancing.
So I think that freelancing is much more important as a skill set and ability, especially for young people, and brings with it lots of opportunities. Is it the domain of the privileged, I'd say my feeling is no. Um, I think you said having background and support allows you to take risks,
Mm,
and I think that's absolutely true. But I think the key thing here is your willingness to take risks,
mm,
and um, I think risk taking can be done by anyone who sort of believes in their ability to bounce back. And I didn't grow
yeah.
up in I didn't grow up in an affluent family. We were quite poor growing up. Parents both worked pretty hard to
And they
maintain.
weren't freelancers, or?
No, no.
Mm.
My dad started his own business um, sort of late in his career when we were young, and there was lots of struggling while he did that.
Okay.
Um, but the one thing that I think that everyone knows, especially poor people, is when it comes down to the wire and the lights are about to go off and there's going to be no food, you find a way. I mean, that's
Mm,
kind of the human thing we do. Necessity is what makes us find solutions. And
mm,
so if you can accept that, if we can accept that that's actually who we are, then we take risks whether we have the background or not, because we're going to find, inevitably, we're going to find a way to not die. Like, people just
mm.
don't disappear when. Obviously there are extreme cases, but the majority of us, when push comes to shove and you've got to perform, you dig down deep and you find
Yeah.
something.
So you mean like staying with your friend in Green Lanes, I guess, like you've
Right,
already talked about.
right,
You
right.
found a support network there, and you know
Yeah, you
you
pick
weren't
yourself
too
up.
proud to ask
No,
to
no.
take that support.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He was a really
Yeah.
nice guy, and yeah, I had no choice. So I
Mm,
think that so one, I think that everyone can take risks, and taking risks, that ability to rely on yourself to just figure it out, is something that is available to everyone.
mm,
But I also think that I spent a lot of time working with I teach an entrepreneurial course, as I talked to you about,
yeah.
and I do some charity work in Ghana, so I visit a few times a year, and coming across all kinds of people who are independent businesses, essentially freelancers,
Mm,
who determined they had a skill or something they learned that other people would pay for,
mm,
and so now, having worked with this many people, especially here locally, you find that lots of people don't recognize or acknowledge the skills that they have. Like, you grew up
mm,
learning how to. Your parents were, I don't know, you did a lot of DIY stuff at home, or you refurbish furniture, or you knit, or whatever. You'd be surprised how much demand there is just for knowledge, for practical knowledge.
mm,
Sometimes it's people who are at home and bored and want to pick up a hobby,
mm.
and they might be interested in paying uh, to learn something, paying a
So this
reasonable.
is something that kind of the like technology and the internet and the kind of new economy is facilitating quite well, I guess. Things like I'm thinking about websites like TaskRabbit, People Per Hour, that kind of thing, where you
Yeah,
can literally find somebody to do something for you for a few hours. So maybe that's potentially a way in. It's I think that work is sometimes not very well paid, but it might be a way in, like you say, to things which we do have skills for and which people will pay money for, and
yeah,
that's how facilitating finding the people who will pay the money for those things, I
yeah,
suppose.
yeah. I had a
Yeah.
photographer guy who just loved taking pictures and knew everything about photography, and we convinced him to start teaching photography. He got really excited about it, and so he could help you take your phone. Everyone's got a phone now, and it's got all kinds of fancy, but most of us use it in auto mode,
Mhm.
where it just does all the work for you.
Yeah.
Well, he could teach you how to take your phone off auto mode and really use all its capabilities to get these great shots that you usually
Mm.
associate with professional photographers.
Yeah.
And he could do that in a couple of workshops.
And that would
So
be cheaper than maybe booking a professional photographer, so therefore
yeah,
there is
and
money.
fun. So
Yeah.
I mean, would you spend 50 quid for 3 workshops to learn how to use your phone more
Yeah, I
effectively?
probably would
A
actually.
lot of people would, and so
Yeah.
very quickly he realized, I can start teaching these workshops.
Mm.
I'm going to choose the areas and the people that I'm going to teach it to, but I can teach these workshops and make some money on the side, and actually maybe grow a business from that.
Mm.
And there are lots of other examples of people I've come across over the last couple of years who have skills that other people are interested in.
Mm.
My particular skill in terms of teaching is funded by the government because it's sort of a national, priority to help both young and unemployed people get back into work. So there's a lot of
Mm.
funding that goes into it.
Mm.
And I'd say that, obviously, step number 2 or rule number 2, freelancer, is make sure you identify a target audience that can pay you for what you're doing and has the money. Right?
Mm.
So lots of
Yeah, because I forgot to ask you about this actually, how you actually make money out of what you're doing. So it's because you're meeting a kind of government priority, isn't
right.
it? That you're
I'm either meeting a
able to
government.
monetize what you do.
Yeah, I'm either
Yeah.
meeting a government priority that they're funding, so they pay providers to deliver services, and then I'm the person that actually delivers,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm helping a private organization meet a corporate objective.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes a corporate they'll want to improve efficiency or knowledge within their staff, and they see the value of paying for that because it's going to give them some return.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, the situation is, as a freelancer, it's your job to be clear as to what the value is and who the value is for, so that you tailor your service to meet those
Yeah, I
needs.
would say I've kind of experienced that as well, in the sense that I always knew that I wanted to work in theatre and the arts, um, but I wouldn't necessarily feel that I was being responsible if I was sitting here encouraging people to quit their 9 to 5s and go and work in theatre as freelancers, because
Right.
that's an incredibly insecure profession actually to work in. And there's an awful lot of people who are having to make their money by waitressing or something else completely different from working in theatre. But the place where I've kind of found my niche, which just so happens to have a bit more money going for it, is within community and disability arts, and that is a priority for the Arts Council. So the Arts Council, for the last, I don't know how many years, but they have these 10-year strategies that they release, and diversity and accessibility of the arts has been near the top of their list for a long, long time. So I think that the money that I've been able to get when I'm doing my own fundraising for projects has been hugely assisted by the fact that I've been able to tick that box with the work that I'm doing. Um, and that's, in some sense, that's a happy coincidence, because I love that kind of work as well. I'm not kind of advocating that, people should kind of completely change what they
Right.
want to do, because there has to be the passion as well, doesn't there?
Yeah, yeah.
You've got to find that lucky point where you're something that you are passionate enough to want to pour your time into and effort into actually coincides with something that somebody else places
Wants to
value
pay
on.
for yes,
So that's
exactly.
really important, I suppose. To
Yeah,
find that.
yeah, it's critical because you can't do the work effectively or get repeat business if you're not any good at it, and you're not gonna be any good at it if you don't really like doing it. And
Yeah.
there's a whole difference.
Yeah.
And so,
So it's kind of 50% passion and 50% research and knowing your market, isn't it?
yeah, and I'd
Yeah.
recommend you start with. I mean, I shouldn't say this because we go into freelance for all kinds of reasons, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't go into freelance and do something I didn't enjoy.
No.
What's the point of that? You may as well go and work with someone else and do something you don't enjoy and not have to worry about all the stress of booking
Yeah.
business and invoicing
And
and
if you're freelancing doing something you don't enjoy, this, what's coming straight into my head is like, oh, maybe you're a Deliveroo driver or something where, there's probably an argument to say that you're being kind of exploited by your client, in a sense. Like, there are many jobs out there that are where you have to be self-employed, but actually on paper you shouldn't be.
right.
And I think that's a really important distinction to make between jobs which are part of this kind of slightly dodgy gig economy and jobs where actually people are getting to do the thing they're passionate about, and they're kind of reveling in being in control of their own work.
Right.
So that's what we're going for.
Yes, that's
The
exactly
reveling
what we're going.
side
And
of
it just
things.
changes. It makes the whole job of being a freelancer. It's night and day. I love teaching, and when I'm in front of a group, I'm in heaven. And so that makes me. I'm notorious for staying up till 3 a.m. the night before a course, prepping and planning. But I'm only doing that because I love, and
Yeah.
it's important to me to be able to deliver effectively when I'm in session. So that passion is absolutely.
And
critical.
this is the same whether you're privileged or not privileged. There's no point doing it unless you love the thing that you do, because
Right.
you will end up doing it night and day.
Yeah, exactly.
And and so long as you can make enough to get by,
right.
then that's kind of all you can hope for in the first place, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the fact that you said that you teach entrepreneurs. do you teach people who come from a wide range of backgrounds, and do you feel a responsibility to be realistic with what you are telling those people about the chances of them succeeding, because you're encouraging them to take risks, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, absolutely. So the organization that I teach entrepreneurial courses through specifically targets um, lower income, vulnerable people, and because entrepreneurial, starting your own business is an opportunity for
Mm.
people who aren't employed. Lots of people have instinctive entrepreneurial skills,
Mm-hmm.
work better when they're their own boss. They struggle in sort of uh, pay PAYE
Mm-hmm.
type situations. So it's an opportunity to help people out. And so there's definitely a component of being realistic,
Mm.
but it's also, who am I to determine that in fact, there's no one that can tell you that you can't succeed. All
Yeah.
we can do is lay out the proper steps, the steps you need to go through, things you need
Mm.
to consider, and what typically has people succeed or fail,
Yeah.
and then give you the opportunity to do that. Most of the people who come on these programs have wanted to or have started in some way trying to trade independently and just
Mm.
never had any structure around it. And so we try to fill in kind of the logical steps
Yeah.
when you start and what you do, which applies to us as freelancers as well. It's the same thing. You're running your own business, really.
Yeah. You've had enough passion and spirit to get to that point of being in a room where you're saying, I want to do this thing.
Right.
So actually maybe just what you need is a spreadsheet template and some
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
boring things like that. But
And there are going to be cases, I'd say not a whole bunch, but there are lots of people who take that course and learn enough from it about business in general life that they say, actually, I think I'm going to use this knowledge and now go to school or maybe get a job in the sector I want
mm,
to start up in my business in first so I can learn more. So
yeah.
it doesn't, sometimes the right advice is this is how you start a business, and now you realize I'm not ready to start a business.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's yeah, I believe in being honest. It's why I do this kind of work, because you can teach a course about starting a business or ICT, but you can always embed all kinds of life tips and things that you've discovered along your journey
Yeah.
and get some back as
Do you
well.
tell the entrepreneurs about your musician journey?
I do.
And
I do. I tell almost every class about
the
that journey.
value of realizing that something's not actually the thing you're gonna end up doing.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
the fact that it's okay to change your mind and try different things and to get out there and sort of live life fearlessly and aggressively, because
Mm.
we've only got the one that
Yeah.
we know of, and yeah.
Oh, this is getting profound. I promised the listeners it
No,
wouldn't be too
no,
profound.
yes, no profoundness, no deepness.
It's okay. You want to have a little? We could have a little section with a kind of warning, content warning.
Right,
Profound.
right. Yeah, so I'd say three things. Obviously, as a freelancer, there's some freedom, and you can pick. And once you've done the work to develop your client base, and I'm kind of just there this past year, um, I have enough existing clients that I really have to go looking for new stuff, and then along the way, new business shows up. So you're
Mm.
having to sort of turn things
And
away.
how long has that taken you to get? Like, how long of freelancing?
That's taken me full freelance. It's taken me 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't emphasize the importance of delivering quality service, even if it's not profitable. Like you're building relationships with clients, so you don't want to burn any bridges at all, because it's your name that you're relying on.
Yeah.
And just do your best to do the best job you can. One of the dangers of this field is that you can take on work and not realize until you have to deliver what's actually involved. And so there's been many a night where I'm up to I'm teaching advanced Excel. Well, I'm going to have to learn a little bit about this.
You
And
teach advanced Excel.
I've
Oh,
taught.
I might be giving you some business.
I've taught some, but I won't do that again, because that whole world is so unbelievably deep, and I'd have to.
Damn it! I need some lessons in advanced Excel.
Yeah, but yeah. So I'd say it's definitely an opportunity in the economy that we're in, where work and permanent work. It's a great opportunity to have something else that you can rely on. Um, I'd also say don't underestimate the skills that you have, because lots of people, especially young people, they're dying to learn skills. And in fact, the government is funding situations for them to
Mm.
learn new skills. And so it's just about looking at the life experiences that you've had and seeing if there's value in there, and who might be interested in learning those skills or taking advantage of those skills.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Know thy
I
worth.
think it's not for the elite at all. I think it's for anyone who has life experience, or cares about just kind of being in control of their own life.
Great. That is very affirming to hear that we're not just indulging in some sort of kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of making more highly privileged people have a lovely time. Do you have an entertaining freelancing story that you would like to share, just to get off your chest, really?
A lot of times it does come down to, I'm not the most organized person. My flatmate, she's used to seeing me. She's going to bed. It's 11. She'll peek out 11:30. She'll like, and it's going to be another 3 a.m. waiting up till 3, 4 before he goes to deliver the next day type scenario. And then I'll come back the night after, and the last 3 hours of what I did, I didn't have to use because I was well over prepared and I overestimated as
Over
usual.
preparation.
Yeah, it's just like,
Yeah.
well, did I
Yeah.
really need to do all of that? But in the moment, I can't help it. I have to walk through my path of what I think I need to learn and get my head clear. And then if I have to do something different, fine, but I still need to. And I find I often underestimate that, especially if you're teaching or you're delivering a wide range of
I find this
services.
quite comforting to hear, because someone as cool as yourself, I would imagine, just walks into every room like with all this knowledge, like you've just been saying, just know what you know the value of your knowledge. I would kind of imagine that you're a no planning kind of guy. But I find this quite comforting that you're an over planning kind of guy, because I'm a massive over planner and it makes me feel very uncool. But you just want to be comfortable in a room, don't you, for every eventuality?
Yeah. I mean, I actually by nature am a no planning type guy, but I don't like not being able to deliver
Yeah,
quality. I can't. So I can show up if it's an emergency and
yeah,
someone says last minute. I can thrive in that scenario and just
yeah,
make. But I don't
yeah,
like.
yeah.
I don't like walking in that way,
If there's
because
time, why waste it not planning?
right, because you can't deliver the
Why waste
same.
it sleeping? I really struggle with that because I like sleeping so much and it's very important to my health. But yeah, it's comforting to know that I'm not the only one that kind of returns to their plan about 6 million times before delivering anything.
Yeah.
This section is called From the Ridiculous to the Sublime. What is the most ridiculous or annoying thing that you have had to do this week?
I don't know if this is as much annoying. It was kind of surprising. I had a client who was delivering for, and they didn't have the equipment that we needed. In this case, some laptops and whatnot
Mm.
wasn't available. So just before I'm heading towards the session, I had to stop and go and meet one of the clients at home to pick up the gear, and then go from home to the class. And
So they were using you as their kind of courier.
yes, and yeah, I suppose that's true. I mean, it wasn't that they're good guys, but I did feel as though, well, I, aren't we supposed to have this sort of
Was it in your
stuff?
contract?
Yes, no,
Did you
definitely
add a
wasn't.
little more
Definitely
afterwards?
wasn't in my contract to have to go and get the gear beforehand and stop in at your place. But I mean, it's a part of it. I guess if you're dealing with a good range of companies, you're going to have, not everyone's going to have all the systems in place.
And it's like you were saying before, being a bike flyer delivery boy, like you just have to be willing to do stuff, don't you, that may or may not come up if you had a normal job and a budget for, I mean, presumably if you had a budget, you could have just sent somebody to.
I would have just sent a cab or something, or
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
exactly. But where's the
yeah,
money?
yeah.
So mine is not dissimilar, actually. My ridiculous thing that I did this week was on Monday of this week. I decided to agree to doing 3 different jobs on the same day in 3 different parts of London.
Ah,
So London is an interesting city where um, you think, yeah, I can do, like, I've got a 2-hour job in the morning, a 2-hour thing that I'm going to go to at lunchtime, and 2 hours in the afternoon. Easy. Any other city that would probably be fine, but doing that in London is like not a thing that I would recommend. Because
yeah.
everywhere, have you ever noticed that if you go from one place to another in London, it always takes an hour, regardless of where you're going from and to? It's like a kind of
It's
magic
true.
rule. Um, so I was running a workshop on Monday morning, and I was also having a meeting on Monday afternoon, and they were kind of in different opposite sides of London. And then I also noticed that there was um, there was an AGM with a free lunch on Monday lunchtime, which I went to for the slightly ridiculous reason that the charity that I founded is currently talking about restructuring its AGM. And I don't really know how to go about that. So I figured it would be useful to go to someone else's AGM in order to see how they do it, because no matter how much advice you get from the charity commission, it's all the legal language around it is so confusing that I thought it would be easier just to see how someone else does it that I kind of respect and know will be doing it properly. Um, so the good thing about my Monday was that I got chips. It was the best free lunch ever.
Oh, wow.
It was like a buffet, but it included hot chips as well as sandwiches. So that was really, really good. But the ridiculous thing was that I had to go to 3 different places for these 3 jobs. Each one took me an hour to get to. It was pouring with rain this Monday. My feet were wet from like 10 a.m. in the morning for the rest of the day, and I had an evening commitment to go. We were going out to a comedy thing in the evening. So by the time I got home Monday night, I was absolutely exhausted, and I basically couldn't function again until Tuesday afternoon. So it was
Mm,
like on the one hand I'd crammed a lot of things into Monday, but the upshot of that was that half of Tuesday was gone.
right, 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 right.
So I mean, maybe it's great that I have the flexibility to do that, but yeah, it felt like one of those days where I was like, oh my god, I've just taken on more than I should have done.
Yeah,
Sounds like you might be having that today with squeezing a podcast in between 2 workshops and a
yeah.
planning session.
Today was an interesting because actually today is usually a day that I have off, except for a few clients every now and then I'll book 1 or 2 Fridays. But today was usually my day off, and that's what it was up until about a week ago. And then I think I agreed with you last week that we
Yeah,
would do here.
snared you into my podcast
Yeah.
net.
And then I told someone I would do a morning session. That was this morning. Um, and then there's an evening session that I've got to do, and there was some planning for that this afternoon that came up at about 2 o'clock. And during the planning session is when I realized, oh, okay, this is not just me showing up and doing something. There's a whole bunch of moving parts here. This is actually, okay. And then this morning session, which was really interesting, we were at a school teaching a program that I've taught before, and something happened at the school that had the young people have some special homework to do. So they really, first they came really late because they were trying to dodge the class to do this work
Oh, I
prep.
see.
They got rounded up and showed up, and we kind of gave them a little bit of a rap on the knuckles. But then we said, look, you guys need some help with this. So we started doing schoolwork with them. It's like a study session. So we converted the session to studying, which got me in away from the content that we were planning to teach, and had me working on high school math,
Oh
and
my
having to
god.
think back to, okay, how did we do this? How did we solve this problem? But it was actually really interesting because I felt really challenged and I wanted to get into
Mhm.
but it was nothing that I had planned for or
And all
done
the
or
time you spend
thought about.
planning.
It's like exactly. So that this day
Oh
today
dear.
has been one of those days where it just kind of happens like that. And as long as you're able to kind of flow and ebb with things and not take things too
Yeah.
seriously, it's fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you for squeezing into time to make a podcast in the middle of it.
Yes, thank you.
We're going to finish off with some nice things. So, the best things that have happened to us this week for being freelancers. The best thing that happened to me was that I got paid a cancellation fee. So, I was booked for a job, and which this is quite rare, I had a contract which stated the fee that I would get if it was cancelled within a short period of time, and it was cancelled and I got paid the fee. And I've been self-employed for 10 years, and this is the first time this has ever happened to me.
Wow, look at that.
So happy days. I got paid to do nothing. um Now what I should have done was just taken the day off, But actually what happened was I was like, oh my God, I've got so many other things to do. That's great. And I ended up just doing probably unpaid work. However, I feel like that's a really good victory. And hopefully, I mean, obviously it's sad when work gets cancelled. I do want to do the work for the sake of the work. But maybe that'll happen again at some point. That does not happen on payroll because they will find something else for you to do.
Right, right.
But when you're freelance and your work gets cancelled, you are entitled to get paid. And yeah, that was good.
Oh, well,
My bank
congratulations.
account is happy.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like
for
that.
a few hours.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's my happy thing.
Well,
Do you have a
congratulations.
happy thing that's happened to you this week?
I actually have a few happy things.
Great.
One is I'm not sure actually qualifies as because of freelance, but
It's okay. You can be happy anyway. It doesn't
okay,
all have to
all
be
right,
because you're
okay, good.
freelance.
Because I finally got a new music project started. Another band that I've joined since being in London that I
Great.
really like, and that has similar potential, I think, to the band that I used to play in when I was in the US. And
You may end up a full-time freelance musician again. You never know.
yeah, I've still been slightly. And that's the other part of it is
It's on the back burner, but
yeah, it's
still
hard to
there.
focus and give your energy to something when you're a freelancer because
Yeah,
you're
of
constantly
course.
always working. But this unit is there's the two guys I play with are really awesome, and we did our third gig at the New Cross Inn. What's today? Friday. So that would have been Wednesday night, and that was really awesome.
Do you want to give us a little plug for what you're called?
Oh
Your
yeah, so
band?
yeah,
I mean, this might be going out around like February, March. So
yeah, so
are you
that
still going to be playing with
that'll
it?
be we'll definitely be together
Give
because
them
we
a
got a
plug.
bunch of. So the band's called Victor and the New Vintage,
Great.
and it is a kind of a fusion of psychedelic Jimi Hendrix type rock with some reggae and hip hop undertones,
That's brilliant.
and quite fun. Yeah, and there's a big part of that. That's I'm learning to sing and play and do and things that I were always I couldn't do, but are now able to do. So it's really exciting. So that was probably the highlight of the week.
Amazing.
But yeah, it's been despite all the craziness, it's been kind of a really rewarding week. Just in the classroom, lots of I do a course with a people's referral unit here in South London, which is super challenging. But working with them and seeing opportunities this week's session.
So this is kids who are excluded from school,
Yes,
is that right?
yeah. And so some quite intense behavioral issues, things that I've just never seen and would never ever tolerate. But
does that make you overplan because you're worried what you're going to come across?
In this case, I've learned that I plan a little bit, but I have to because I'm going to have to change and adjust, and most of it is behavior management. So we have to do more planning to just be creative about how we engage this group and have them have fun without them thinking, oh, this is really lame or whatever the young person's term of the day is.
Yeah.
So, but that was really rewarding this week. In fact, I think all my classes were just really rewarding. So it's been a really good week, and it's Friday, and I've had this awesome podcast with Jenni from the block, which is really cool.
I'm not sure if I'm Jenni from the block yet, but yeah, I'm making a podcast, which is great.
Jenni from the Hub, how's that?
Jenni from the I'll be Jenni from the Hub. That's great.
Jenni from the Hub, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Wayne. That's
been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Lovely to talk to you, and good luck with your evening's workload.
Thank you very much.
Have a fabulous weekend.
Yes, you too.
We'll say goodbye to our millions of listeners.
Goodbye, millions of
listeners. You've been listening to Properly Freelance with Jenni Elborn, and my guest was Wayne James. My theme music is by Sarah Weiler, and the podcast is supported by Impact Hub Brixton. If you're enjoying the podcast, please let me know by emailing properlyfreelance@gmail.com or tweeting me @properfreelance. Happy freelancing!